Right. New live stream, new year. Talking to myself. Go see if I can multitask here while I'm running this. Got a few pages open. Let's see here. Oh, hey Thomas, that was quick. Sorry, I was actually looking at another screen. I didn't expect someone to show up so quickly. So, happy New Year. Hope you're well. I'm okay. I've just been looking at news of Justin Trudeau resigning in Canada, so I was just looking over that. So I'm good. Yourself? So, Thomas, if you've been to my live streams before, you know how it works. I like to get quite a few people around so we could get a bit of a conversation going. But if there's anything you want to bring up to sort of get things going, then feel free. Haha, no worries. Happy New Year. Thanks for the music's going. Yeah, I don't have strong views on Trudeau, not very strong views, but I'm not surprised. I think that it's a combination of things from what I gather. I think the some of the overtures from Trump is putting pressure on the Canadian political scene, but I do think that Trudeau's kind of outstayed his welcome in the sense that even in Canada, which is famously politically correct, Trudeau's long been seen as a little bit sanctimonious. That's the impression I get as an outsider. Um, you know, to the point where he's almost preachy. You know, that's my outside perspective. I think that also with I mean Trump's I have to say though Trump's comments on calling him a governor of like treating Canada like the 51st state. I've no doubt it's bombast, it's rhetoric, but it may actually be a cynical way of Trump putting pressure on Trudeau. Not that I mean I think he probably did have to go. He's one of Canada's longest serving prime ministers, over 9 years now. I was just looking at a list actually. He's just below Stephen Harper, who's in for 10 years. Um, he's resigned today or announced his resignation, but he won't formally step down until March the 24th. The longest record, incidentally, just a little bit of historic interest here, is William Lyon Mackenzie King, 21 years in power over three different terms, which actually is tied to our longest serving Prime Minister, Sir Robert Walpole. So, yeah. Probably get the Times tomorrow or another broadsheet to get more coverage of this, but I'm not surprised. And I agree, Canada does need a change of direction. But I think we're seeing this in a lot of Western countries. You're seeing these. I mean, it's the nature of democracy that governments change periodically, but we're seeing it in Germany as well. I think Olaf Scholz will be stepping down in March after a relatively short chancellorship. So you'll see how things play out. Anyway, how was your New Year, Christmas? Did you do anything special? For me, it was quite quiet. I had a bad migraine on New Year's Eve. I should say, by the way, Thomas, since you're the first here, if I suddenly go, I'm intending to watch something with my parents. We've been watching a series on Lockerbie recently. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's a dramatisation with Colin Firth, so I've been watching that. And they may call up, so we'll go and join them if that's the case. There may be a little bit of a lapse here with comments, so if you're trying to type, yeah, that'll be it. Watched Jaws last night. 50 years since that movie was made, so I think it's the same as the UK when the Tories had run their course and needed to be replaced. I spent Christmas in Spain. It was quite nice. I haven't watched the Lockerbie drama yet. Spain, that sounds nice. You know, I used to think that Christmas in warmer climates wouldn't really feel like Christmas, but the thing with a country like Spain, I don't know, the whole Feliz Navidad thing. I was in the Philippines in July, and I imagine Spain, like the Philippines, gets quite into Christmas because it's a pretty Catholic country, so the whole nativity thing. But I'd actually be interesting to be in a country like that for a change over Christmas. As much as I like the idea of a, well, we didn't have a white Christmas anyway, but was that, do you know people there, or was it just a holiday that you'd already planned? I should say last December I was actually in Berlin, not over Christmas, but shortly before, and it was very cold. It was about -5. I saw the King of Belgium there, just by chance. He happened to be visiting, making a state visit, so I actually saw the King of Belgium. But the photo was a bit shaky because it was so cold I couldn't hold the camera straight. It was at the Brandenburg Gate. Berlin's an interesting city to be in at Christmas time, very Christmassy. The Lockerbie drama is very good. I won't give too much away if you have access to it, but it's, I mean, the good thing about British dramas is they manage to get the drama side of it without being overly sensationalist. My girlfriend is Spanish, so we spent it with her grandmother, then had a few days in Menorca. After that was nice. To be fair, it was so cold here now in comparison. Yeah, I mean, even being British, you'd think we'd be used to the cold, but I don't like it. I don't like having to drag myself out of bed when it's, because I live in an old Victorian house, so this flat does get pretty chilly even when the heat's on. I've got 4 layers on at the moment. No, 3 layers. It's no, 4 layers. Yeah, this isn't like the most comfortable thing. It's a little bit itchy, but it is warm. But yeah, so that's obviously your connection. Interestingly enough, when I was on the online dating site, there was one of the contacts I was talking to, and she was in Spain. She was a Filipina, but she was in Spain. She's a nice girl, but we just agreed to be friends. Because I think she was very, very busy as a sort of influencer type, not the sort of cynical, shallow influencer, but she was a dancer of sorts. And yeah, can I ask whereabouts in Spain? Is that Madrid, or is it? Oh, you mentioned, sorry, you had a few days in Menorca. I'd imagine though, even Spain wasn't that hot. I'd imagine because I've heard that Madrid, for example, I don't know if you were there, but I've heard Madrid can actually be quite chilly. The valley that it's in. Hi, Jax. Happy New Year to you too. Thank you. I think it's disgusting that the Libyan terrorist got released on medical grounds after what he did. Well, like I said, I don't want to give too much away with this drama, but it does touch on Abdel Basit al Megrahi and the very controversial decision made at that time by the Scottish government. Well, it hasn't got up to that point, but basically, this isn't giving too much away because it's pretty obvious early on. It's about one father's fight for justice. He was just an ordinary man, a GP from Bromsgrove, but he actually spearheaded the British family's fight for justice. Sometimes there was, well, I don't want to give too much away, but the second episode showed him doing something rather reckless just because he was so desperate to make a point about what happened. Um, and yeah, I agree. I mean, that was, the Libyans said they would never get fair justice in America, but Scotland went too far the other way. I think the Scottish justice system generally is far too lenient. Um, but he got released on medical grounds, and it turns out he lived 4 years afterwards anyway. And the point I always make about Lockerbie is, if the Gaddafi regime was innocent, if it had no part in that, why did Gaddafi pay out money to the victims? I mean, an innocent party would not do that, because the Blair government proposed that in exchange for reducing sanctions. So I definitely think Gaddafi's regime was culpable, and I think it was basically revenge. Um, but of course, innocent people paid the price. One thing about, sorry, I have seen your comment, Thomas. She's from Girona, Catalonia. Girona, that's interesting because I remember I used to live in Northern Ireland. Sorry, I'm derailing here, but I used to live in Northern Ireland, and there was a shipwreck of the Spanish Armada called the Girona. So I wonder, was it named after that city? Don't know. Um, so we went there after Christmas to Menorca. I want to know your opinion on an article, if it's okay to direct you to it. It's a local story about my area, but it's caused a lot of controversy. Well, I'm okay with that, Thomas, but I'll go to it in a second. I was just going to mention something about the Lockerbie thing. I've been to Lockerbie, actually, because my parents used to live in Dumfries and Galloway, about half an hour from Lockerbie in Kirkcudbright. And even today, it's kind of a somber little town. It's a very small place, only about 3,000 people. But they have a memorial there. I mean, 11 townspeople were killed, as well as the 259 people on the plane. And they have a little stitched 747 actually at the memorial. It was a very somber place. There was an entire school from New York was killed, like an entire class, I should say. It was, it's a very poignant place, and you get the atmosphere around somewhere like that. We visited just to visit the memorial site in Christmas. I think we went in Christmas 2017 or Christmas 2016. It had a sort of atmosphere. But anyway, if you do get a chance, if you have access to that Sky, I mean, I thought it was a streaming service that you had to pay for, but somehow my dad got access to it. It is a strong dramatization. I would recommend it if you do have access to it. So, JX, Happy New Year to you. Yeah, Thomas, feel free to direct me to that. I'm not sure how, though, if you're going to put a link in the. I mean, go ahead if it's a link. Hi, Paul. Welcome. Happy New Year. So, Thomas, if you could put that link on this live stream, I think that's the best way to do it, and I'll try to open it up. And I don't. I obviously I don't know the issue, so I don't know what like. But I assume that's what you want to do, Thomas, to put the link here in the live stream. That'll be the easiest thing, I think, because I can't guarantee I'll have time otherwise. I've sent the link. Can you not see it? I'm afraid I can't. Like I say, there may be a bit of a lapse. If it's a link, it may take longer to come through. So as soon as I see it, I'll open it. It may just be, I'm sure you've sent it, but it may just be that it's taken a few seconds to appear. Yeah. But as soon as it comes through, I will open it. Because the reason I say that is when I use Skype, when I'm teaching my students, sometimes when I send them a link, it takes them a few seconds to see it. So that's probably all it is. You mentioned it's a local issue and it's caused controversy. Is it a crime thing? Is it? Yeah. By the way, guys, I've just explained this to Thomas, so I'll just say to JX and to Paul, I'm watching something with my parents, so if they suddenly call up, I'll cut the live stream short because I've been watching the dramatization in Lockerbie with them, and I asked them to call me up when they're going to watch it. So, yeah, I'm just waiting for that to appear, Thomas. I'm sure it will. Did it actually go through on your end? I mean, or did it say it wasn't going through? When I set up these live streams, I always do like a playback thing, which is that I think that should enable all comments to get through or something. I'm not sure. But while we're waiting for that, JX, Paul, did you guys do anything for New Year, or was it just quiet? My family, we actually done it a little bit differently. We have an old Victorian clock, and we saw it in midnight with the chimes on that clock. So it was a little bit different this year. Okay, so the link isn't working, so I'll comment the article's content. Yeah, that might be. I know it's not ideal, but maybe you can cut paste something like that, like highlight the article and then paste it here or something. I'm not sure. You know what? I'm going to try something just since we're talking about this. Before you do that, Thomas, I'm going to put a link just to see if it works on a live stream. I'm going to link the Wikipedia article list of Prime Ministers of Canada. Just see if it works. This is just experimental because we were talking about Justin Trudeau anyway. So if you guys can see this, then we know that links work. Okay, let's see, link. Okay, can you guys see the Wikipedia article, list of Prime Ministers of Canada? If that comes through, then links should work. Okay. So with yours, Thomas, if I will say this, sometimes local newspapers, they have a million advertisements. So that can sometimes slow it down. It's something I notice. Local newspapers and also tabloids tend to they have a lot of advertisements, and it can sometimes slow down the what is it called, the buffering speed. Okay, so yeah, Thomas, I'll let you just maybe cut paste or whatever you think's best. And while we're waiting for that, if you still only 2-3 people at the moment. I'm actually waiting for my girlfriend to get a UK visa, tourist visa, and honestly, I'm a bit nervous about it because frankly, our side makes it very bureaucratic. I mean, have to go through all sorts of questions about how much money they have, bank account balance. It's so much bureaucracy just for a tourist visa. and I'm nervous. I just hope she gets it. I mean, she has a job and she's no criminal record. She's well travelled, so I don't see any reason why she shouldn't. But we'll know in the next few days. I'm not saying anything. I just want to. I guess if we keep introducing new subjects, it'll slow down your link, Thomas. So while we're waiting, can you speak Spanish, Thomas, or if you, I mean, do you have elementary level? Are you fluent? Because I think, I mean, my impression is among European languages, it isn't the hardest. It's manageable language. Okay, the Vale of Rheidol had heavily promoted its polar bear express trains as family entertainment for the festivals. I think this is the thing you were talking about. Vale of Rheidol, just I must admit, I'm not sure where that is. So Vale of Rheidol, where is it? I'm sorry, Thomas. I know you've mentioned before where you are, but my memory eludes me right now. Oh, Aberystwyth. Okay, yes, you did say it's close Aberystwyth. Okay, I'll let you continue. Yep, I'm reading. The Vale of Rheidol had heavily promoted its polar bear express trains as family entertainment for the festive season. Okay, so I assume this. I'll just let you continue. I imagine this is like a tourist thing, one of these Christmas attractions, the polar bear express trains. I can imagine where this story is going. It's probably going to be. Apologies here, I'm jumping the gun a bit, but it's probably going to be one of these Christmas attractions that let people down because there's been a few reports of that. The thing is, Thomas, if I look that up, I don't like a lot of newspapers have what's called a block. There's a name for it, paywall. Yeah, especially local newspapers, they could sometimes do that. But you know what? I'll see if I could find it actually. Polar bear express Phil of Rito. Let's see. Just to save you time, maybe if I can get the article myself. I see their main website, the Vale of Rheidol, if I'm pronouncing that right, railway. Cambrian News doesn't have a paywall, and that's where the article is. Okay, I'll see if I can find it. I've just typed in the keywords Vale of Rheidol, Cambrian News. Just bear with me a second. I'll see if I could get the article myself. So you just want to know my take on this? All right. Okay, this isn't what I was expecting. Um, okay, Thomas, there's a couple of news actually with this. There's one about, in fact, there's three different stories connected to this. So I'm not sure which one you're referring to. One is about a convicted paedophile and registered sex offender who's been hired by the Vale of Rheidol Railway. One is about just the news that it is opening, and another is about storm damage to the railway. So which one are you referring to? Which of those stories? Because, like I said, there's three different stories on Cambrian News. One is from Christmas Eve about the convicted paedophile. Is that the one you're talking about? I'll open this up just to see if this is the reports by Deb Luxon. That's her. I mean, my Wi-Fi is okay. It's just warning your connection is unstable. Well, oh, here we go. Okay, guys, just give it a few seconds. Hi, Thomas. Let me know if you can hear me now. Okay. Yeah, sometimes that's the problem when I'm opening up different pages. It could just slow it down a bit. So I'll try to not do that. But yeah, I was reading that article. I'll try to read more without slowing this down. And if it keeps slowing it down, I'll have to just stick to the video. I'll try reading a bit more here. Let's see. But despite the railway's claim, can be used as a okay. The Vale of Rheidol has had heavily promoted as polar bear equestrians as family entertainment for the festive season. Yeah, I've got that. That's the bit that you were linking. Um, Reeves, who previously worked as a music teacher at primary schools in Scotland, was, like I say, there's so many ads. This is the annoying thing about local papers. I know they have to do it, but it's still irritating. Was convicted of sexually assaulting 5 girls. Um, and in terms of, he was placed on the sex offenders register for 2 years and sentenced to 120 hours of unpaid work. That's typical of soft Scottish justice. 2 years. Why just 2 years? I think that should be at least 10 years, at least. In fact, if he sexually assaulted girls, he should be on it for life, arguably. In 2019, he pleaded guilty to sexually assaulting 4 other girls aged 10 at a school and was set to free. I'm reading this and think, why the hell wasn't he in prison? This is typical of the Scottish justice system. We were talking about Lockerbie earlier, and sorry, he was also okay. Well, we get the message there. So this guy has committed offences in Scotland. He got community service and was placed in the sex offenders register for a pretty brief time, considering what he done, and now he's working at a tourist attraction in Wales. So, Thomas, okay, is that still clear? I need to make sure you can hear me okay. Just let me know if it's like the audio's clear. I'll not keep switching back to that because I think it slows down the video. Yes, the company also defended him, saying he's a valued employee. I think there's two scandals here, actually. Number one is a pathetic sentence that he received in the first place. I mean, this isn't even someone looking at material online, which is bad enough. It says he actually assaulted girls, not looked at images, which I think is bad, but assaulted girls. And yet, what was it, 2 years in the sex offenders register and 300 hours of community service? That's not the sort of sentence that should be handed out to a dangerous individual who's a threat to children. It's disgrace. Um, as for the company hiring him, this is clearly a job that has contact with children. I mean, it's a family attraction, so of course there's children involved. Even if he's like, the engine is kept away from the bit where kids are getting in, it's just too close for comfort. It's just stupidity, absolute stupidity, recklessness. Um, I think the fact that this guy assaulted 4 girls shows that he is dangerous. That this wasn't like, well, there's no excuse, but it's not like he just looked at something online. He's actually a convicted predator. So it reminds a bit of the rapist that was allowed into the Olympics this last year in Paris, the Dutch rapist. You know, there's an argument that when someone's done their time or they've served their sentence, then they should be allowed to rehabilitate. But there also has to be an argument for public safety. I mean, I do think that the sentence that he got was far, far too lenient. Reading that, if he assaulted girls, he should have went to prison, um, and he should be on the sex offenders register much, much longer. But taking that what it is, a soft Scottish justice system, um, the fact that this company would have been aware of that because they would have had to disclose it, they would have been aware of it, so they can't claim ignorance. Um, it raises questions about their judgment. I mean, I think if we're going to rehabilitate predators back into society, at least should be in jobs that are well away from children. I don't know, maybe working on a factory production line or something. The film The Woodsman with Kevin Bacon actually showed that, where he was a predator and he was working in a factory. Um, they say he isn't working directly with the kids, but it was literally in the picture of the local advert in the train for the Polar Express. That's a disgrace. But the thing about this, from what I gather from the report, and like I say, I haven't read the whole report because it's slowing down the video, but they're not even saying, "Oh, we didn't know about this. We didn't know the guy was a convicted predator." It, I mean, he would have had to disclose that, and if he, if they didn't know that, whatever way they gloss this over, it doesn't make them look good. Because if they didn't know, then they were sloppy in not doing the research on their employees. If they did know, then they're putting a dangerous person in the vicinity of children. It's a disgrace. I don't know what the attraction's like in terms. To be honest, Thomas, I thought you were going to. I thought it was going to be something else. I thought it was going to be because we've heard a lot about Christmas attractions, people paying a lot of money, and then families complain about a lack of snow and very lackluster elves and that sort of thing. I didn't think it would be this. So yeah, thanks for raising the issue because it's an important one. I think it's a disgrace. I don't want keep switching back to it because it might slow down the video, but they knew it's expensive too. £40 a child, that's quite steep. Hope it's worth it. I mean, leaving aside this, I hope it's a pretty good attraction. But that's beside the point. I mean, I don't know. I hope with this being revealed by Cambrian News, there's public pressure on them to drop this guy, employ someone else. He should not be allowed to, frankly, quite frankly, I'm between jobs. I deserve a job a lot more than he does. It's kind of like I come from an education background. When you're a teacher, I mean, I haven't taught in schools in the UK, but even to be an exam invigilator, you have to go through strict background checks, and that's reasonable, that's understandable. I done all of that, and it's difficult for me to get a job. So it frankly pisses me off that an actual predator can so easily get a job, and I'd imagine it's pretty decent pay as well. He doesn't deserve it, you know. Firstly, he should have went to prison, and on his release, he should have got, if not a lifetime, being on lifetime sex offenders register, certainly a hell of a lot longer than 2 years. If he attacks another child, then the Scottish justice system will have a lot to answer for, and so will his company for enabling him. It's infuriating, actually. So, yeah, thanks for raising that issue. I must admit I hadn't heard about it. But maybe this sort of thing is prolific. Maybe it happens a lot, which is why we don't hear so much about individual cases. Um, so yeah, that's you asked how I feel about it. That's how I feel. I think it's a disgrace. I'm just so surprised that A, he was never convicted, and B, they bloody hired him. But I just think if he, so you say he was never convicted. I thought he was convicted, but he got the community sentence and 2 years on the sex offenders register. So this isn't. I mean, this isn't the case that There's allegations that haven't been proven. I mean, he wouldn't have been. He wouldn't have got any sentence if he wasn't. All right, yeah, yeah, I agree. He should have went to prison. But this is the thing. He's guilty. I mean, this isn't that someone's been accused of something, and in this country we do have a principle of innocent until proven guilty. But this isn't a case of he's been accused of something. He's been found guilty in a court of law. I'm disgusted by the Scottish Sentencing Council at the moment. Just a disclaimer here, I did have a bit of an exchange with them over, in Scotland, they actually have a system there whereby if an offender is under the age of 25, not under 18, under 25, they are basically not treated the same as an adult offender, even though they are an adult. I mean, in Scotland, like the rest of the country, you can legally get married, you can start a business, you can join the armed forces, you can drink, you can smoke, you could pretty much do everything by the age of 18. But according to the Scottish Sentencing Council, you're not really, your brain isn't fully developed, and they cite international research. I just think they're soft on crime, quite frankly. We were talking about Lockerbie earlier. It's the Scottish government that allowed McGrahy to be released early. I think fundamentally the Scottish justice system is soft on crime. England and Wales isn't much better, But Scotland particularly is appallingly soft on crime. Northern Ireland, it's a bit of a different situation because, there's been the hiatus with the government there. But um, yeah, this does say one thing though. There's one positive thing about this, which is the importance of the freedom of the press. Without Cambrian News covering this, and credit to them for doing so, no one would know. And the thing is, it isn't just shit stirring or being sensationalist. There is a strong public interest at stake here. Sometimes newspapers do shit stir. Sometimes they do exaggerate things or distort things. But I think in this case, for someone who assaulted four young girls to be working at a family attraction, there's a very strong public interest there. So credit to Cambrian News. I hope they push this hard. And I hope now that people read this in the Aberystwyth area, they will put pressure on this attraction to drop this guy. Like, really. Um, but then there is also an argument that there's public responsibility. We can say this is disgraceful, this is outrageous. But if the public do nothing about it, if they're aware of this and they just say, well, that's bad, but we'll just go anyway, the public have more power than they realize. If enough people put pressure on this company and say, we demand that you drop this guy because we don't want our children being vulnerable to him, then they'll be pressured to do it. They won't, they're a business after all. They won't want to lose money. So it's January now. I don't know if they're still open. Do you know, Thomas? Are they still operating? I mean, is it just a seasonal thing? Because if it's a seasonal thing, presumably they're going to hire him next year as well. Well, at the very least, there could be enough public pressure put on them to ensure that he's not hired next year, if that's the case. But yeah, it's a disgrace. And it's the sort of thing that I think just infuriates people. A big issue is that a lot of people come from away from the area to go to the railway. So I feel for them not knowing that. Being said, that Wales Online covered this too after the Cambrian News it's open. Well, that's good. Again, freedom of the press is so important. So if Wales Online is also covering it, and I imagine they have a bigger readership than Cambrian News, hopefully more attention on the case. Like you say, it's a betrayal of people who've paid good money and come a long way to see this attraction. I mean, I'm not a father, but if I found out about this, I'd be furious. I'd be thinking, you kept me as a parent in the dark about this. And even if nothing actually happened to my child, that's not the point. It's the principle of it. It's been all over the community Facebook page, and the railway have been deleting comments on the Facebook and blocking people for commenting about it on the posts. Well, that's a disgrace. So instead of actually listening to people's concerns, they're just trying to silence them. Absolute disgrace. But now people do have a choice. They shouldn't give them money. They shouldn't go. Now that people are aware of this, there's plenty of other Christmas attractions out there. But I think that you know this we do need to be a little bit careful that there isn't a response that every employee of Christmas attractions comes under scrutiny as a potential predator, because of course most aren't. But um, I do think there is an onus on companies, definitely, when this sort of thing has been exposed, to reassure people instead of act like the public are overreacting to something, because they're not. The public are right to be angry by this. I'm tempted now to go there myself and give my what for, even though I've no intention of going there. I don't have a family, and I'm not going to be going there. But it's the principle of it. It is the principle. Excuse me. It is the principle of it. Um, is this a case for government intervention? I mean, right now, Labour's come under a lot of heat for blocking another inquiry into the grooming gangs case. Just to lay out my case on that, I don't know. I do think severe mistakes have been made, and a lot of those cases were under Labour councils. I do think a culture of political correctness, since we're on the subject, a culture of political correctness prevented something being done about that. And I think it's bad optics that Labour is blocking inquiry. Having said that, the right are being a little bit hypocritical, because the last Tory government Also, their record isn't much better on this. And it was the Tories that were in power on a national level. So, yes, it's a local abuse scandal, but the Tories were on power at national level. So I think there's a lot of politics going on with this. Starmer has forcefully defended his record as Director of Public Prosecutions. I think there are valid questions. I will say, though, that Elon Musk, it's not his place to be asking them. And I do think he's shit stirring by saying, um, uh, Jess Phillips is responsible for the genocidal abuse of children. That's inflammatory. I do think that's wrong because Jess Phillips, I haven't always agreed with her. There's times she's been a militant feminist, but I think it's wrong to say that she's never cared for abuse victims. That's just factually wrong. Um, so I would be slightly cautious about some right wingers jumping on this stuff. Having said that, there are very important questions to ask, and I do think there should be a public inquiry. Um, yeah, I absolutely agree, Thomas. But this is the problem. I mean, Labour isn't helping its own case. They're shooting themselves in the foot. They might argue there's already been inquiries, but um, the grooming gangs case was one of the biggest scandals we had. And King of America, I haven't ignored your post, so sorry. I'm going to read out your post here. Hello, in the last live stream, you asked which US state I'm from. I'm assuming because I often ask US centric questions, I didn't get a chance to answer, but I'm actually not American. I live in the UK. Apologies. I must admit, I just assumed with your username you were. The reason I have a keen interest in American politics and history is a long story, but one reason is because I had an aunt who lived in Iowa and died a few years ago. Well, condolences for your loss there. But I must admit, I thought you were American. But I think the thing about America is we can't not be interested in American politics because it affects the rest of the world. Welcome, Zayn. You're an American, so welcome. We were just talking about American politics. I think you're American. Apologies if I've got that wrong. But Happy New Year, both the King of America and the Zayn. Me and Thomas were just, if you guys have just joined in, me and Thomas were discussing a case in Wales whereby a convicted predator has been employed by a family attraction, a Christmas railway theme, themed attraction. And yeah, we're discussing that. But on American politics, I mean, for example, I've taken a big interest in the passing of President Jimmy Carter and his state funeral. I've been following that closely. Today, I've been looking at Canadian politics. To answer your question earlier, yes, I speak Spanish. Would that be fluently or like is it a manageable level? I'd like to learn Spanish actually, but having a Filipino girlfriend, she gave me a book on it's a book on interesting aspects of Filipino history by one Ambef R. Ocampo, and he pointed out that Filipinos sometimes, when Filipinos are in Spain, they say the wrong word with the wrong pronunciation. That can lead to awkward situations. Let's see. Yeah, yeah. So we were talking about that subject. I do think there should be a public inquiry, but firstly, I don't think it's any of Elon Musk's business. He's just sticking his nose into our politics far, far too much, which to me goes beyond simply having an opinion. He's just interfering. And the problem I have with Musk supporters is they seem blinded by the fact that you have this guy who's extremely powerful. He's the richest man in the world. He has enormous influence. That to me has a negative aspect on democracy because when you have one person with such clout, it especially when he's not even a British citizen, I think it just has an adverse effect on people's thought process. I mean, yeah, and I don't like the fact that the right sort of act like we should pander to Trump and Musk. But I will say this, the bromance is falling apart already. Trump had a rant recently about how he's the president and Musk isn't, and now there's a feud between Farage and Musk. It's looking like a joke. I think as unpopular as Labour is right now, I think the right is going to be out of power for a very long time if they keep infighting the way they are. Fluency is a skill. I couldn't work in something like a university professor with my Spanish, but I could do normal jobs, live, work. Well, that's all you need, isn't it? I mean, that's All her family I speak to in Spanish, so yeah, it's fluent. Well, yeah, that level's well above my Tagalog, my Filipino. Tagalog actually isn't super difficult. I could manage some of the basic stuff. I speak moderate, not even moderate, I'd say elementary Chinese, just because I had years of contact with Chinese students and I lived and worked there twice, but it's by no means fluent. It would be elementary level. Um, but if I could learn other languages, Tagalog, honestly, Spanish. The reason being, I mean, I'm not in a rush to visit Spain. I'd like to visit Spain, but it's a big language. So, it's useful if I ever went to Latin America or a good part of Latin America, not Brazil, obviously. But I think it would be a useful language to know. So, yeah, if I had time and the inclination, Spanish, Tagalog, and maybe just develop my Chinese more. French and German. I honestly find French quite tricky because of all the little accents and so on. German can be tricky. Toxic, welcome. Konnichiwa, Nathan. Yeah. Uh, Gensun, Genkitsuka. Are you learning Japanese? Genkitsuka. I did not know that one. I know Konnichiwa was the greeting. Arigato? Isn't arigato thank you? Or So what's your motivation in learning Japanese, Toxic? We were just talking about languages just now. Are you going to Japan? Do you have a Japanese girlfriend? Do you have Japanese friends? Because the thing is with a language like Japanese is quite niche. I mean, really, the only people that speak it are Japanese. It's not a language that's really spoken in other countries. So I'm just curious why. Essentially, plan to go to Japan at some point. I'd like to go to Japan, but money just doesn't allow it. It's an expensive country. If I'm looking at Asia, there's some countries I would like to see. Japan and South Korea, definitely. Once again, I'm into South Korea because I've been watching the new series of Squid Game. And, Korean culture's been really intercepted into the 21st century. So, yeah, I'd like to see South Korea. Vietnam, because I missed out on an opportunity when I had to leave China early. I could have gone to Vietnam. Indonesia, India. Well, to be honest, any of those countries. But I've been to the Philippines. I will no doubt go back to the Philippines. We can go there, visa free travel. One thing, guys, if you ever go to the Philippines, I will say people are very hospitable and welcoming. But on the negative side, they need to improve the tourism sector because among Asian countries, it's not that visited. It's not visited the way Thailand is, for example. And they have a ridiculous thing in the Philippines whereby tourist attractions, for example, they only allow group bookings. They won't basically let you go around a historic house if you're an individual. It's ridiculous. Me and my girlfriend went to a place and they said, sorry, only group bookings four or more. Well, that's ridiculous. A guy who's come from the other side of the world is prepared to spend money and you're going to refuse him, especially in a place. It wasn't even in Manila. So I'll tell you guys a story really quickly. Sorry, I know there's a lot of comments coming through here and I'll come to them. Really quickly, me and my girlfriend had planned to go to Mount Pinatubo, which is famous for a volcanic eruption in 1991. We went all the way there, 4.5 hours drive early in the morning. We got there, and it turns out that there's a military base on its base, and they said, sorry, no foreigners. So basically, that was it. No allowances because I'm a foreigner. Me and my girlfriend had to spend all day at this hotel. Now, the company paid for it because they messed up and they did give us a refund, but that was so if you ever go to the Philippines, it's the people are hospitable and there are interesting things to see, but just be aware that their tourism sector isn't as developed as other Asian countries, and it's on the plus side, some of the buffets are the best I've ever been to. Massive selection of food, the best I've ever been to. And affordability, it's pretty reasonable, except eating out can actually be similar to Western prices, but other things are pretty affordable. Um, Hospitality is wonderful, but yeah, the tourism sector could improve, if I'm being honest. And it's a pity because there's huge potential there. There's parts of the Philippines are stunningly beautiful. They have a lot of potential. They have an interesting history, but they just need to develop that tourist trade. Um, okay, let me just go back a bit because a lot of comments are coming through here and I don't want to miss out. Toxic, I know you're leaving a lot of comments, so apologies if I don't get round to all of them. Listen, guys, just so you know, I'll go back to what I said at the start of the video. My parents are watching a series on Lockerbie with Colin Firth. They may call up at any moment, and if they do that, I will cut the live stream short simply because I don't want to keep them waiting because they're getting older and I don't want to keep them waiting. So just a heads up that I may have to do that. But before that, did you find out when you worked in China you had to put on a more standard British accent for them to understand you? Well, honestly, Thomas, although I've got an accent, I tend to speak with standard English anyway. I mean, I've got an accent, obviously, I have a Northern Irish accent, but I'd say it's particularly strong. If you if you met my uncle, you would see a strong accent. Um, I don't tend to use colloquialisms. I mean, I've grown up in Northeast England, and there's words up here that I never use. For example, people say bairns for children. Why I man is like a sort of affirmation of a statement. I tend to speak in standard English. So, no, I didn't really because they could understand me for the most part. One thing about a Northern Irish accent, I do tend to speak quite fast. So, I had to remind myself of that sometimes to slow down a little bit. But there was a guy actually um, from somewhere in Yorkshire, I believe, and Yorkshire people tend to leave out prepositions. If anyone's from Yorkshire, apologies, but it is something I've noticed. They leave out prepositions, so I couldn't understand the guy. Sometimes he was kind of my flatmate, and I wondered how is he going to teach his students. Yet when in lessons he reverted to just standard English, and he was very audible. But yeah, it is a point you definitely need to speak standard English. There's nothing wrong with teaching colloquialisms to students who are a bit more advanced, and it can even be useful for students who are coming to the UK. But in terms of just teaching as a basis, you need to definitely teach standard English. Okay, I'm going to go down a bit because there's a lot of comments here. But yeah, sorry to go back to my story about Mount Pinatubo. Yeah, so that was a wasted day, and I wasn't happy about it. I did complain to the company. Now, they were very apologetic. They genuinely didn't know that this military base was here. But I kind of felt, well, it's your job to know. You're advertising this, and we paid a lot of money to go. It was meant to be like a day out trekking on Mount Pinatubo. Having said that, I went to another mountain which was even taller, so I kind of felt that made up for it. But it was a wasted day. And the strange thing is, we stayed at this hotel and they still had Christmas decorations in July because the Philippines goes crazy for Christmas. So that was interesting. But I was a bit cranky after that day. I just felt it was a waste. And, this was 2 days after one of the flight companies, one of the airlines I'd been on had lost my case. So it was a bit, I was a bit tired at that point. But overall, the trip was good. Right, going back to the issue of America in terms of gun violence, I was watching a Mea Culpa podcast episode with Fred Gutenberg, and I must say, it's a heartbreak. He's essentially the book writer of American Carnage. I've heard of that. And he is the father of a daughter who was tragically shot in one of the school shootings years ago. And he's one of these people fighting like hell against the NRA during the last State of the Union, when Donald Trump himself was going on his usual rants about the Second Amendment, Fred stood up in a fit of rage and screamed out, "What about victims of gun violence um, you're getting cut off there, Toxic." I'll continue that in a second, but I just want to address that before we continue. Yeah, I mean, after the New Orleans attack, Trump was going on about foreign criminals being more dangerous than our own criminals. Well, there is a threat from foreign criminals, of course there is, and I've always been okay with preventing foreign criminals like cartel members and so on getting into the country. But in this case, it turns out that the guy responsible was an American soldier who'd converted to Islam, if I've got that right. But even if this idea that okay, 14 people are killed in a car ramming rampage, terrible thing. And yes, it is a terrorist attack. But why is that more serious in the mind of Donald Trump than a mass shooting? The president of the United States should be treating all acts of violence with a serious attitude, not just cherry picking which ones he wants to take seriously. Biden, to be fair, does take it all, with the gravity it deserves. I don't think Trump does. Let's see. Zayn, what about Laos, Myanmar, Thailand? Agreed, Asian countries aren't very immigrant friendly. Um, well, in the case, I mean, with the Philippines, okay, we'd be the same in the UK if we had a military installation. Foreigners wouldn't be allowed near it. But my issue wasn't so much that; it was more that we wasted the time going there. They could have told us that in the first place. They could have just said, "Sorry, Mount Pinatubo isn't open to visitors." So, it was a waste of time that I took issue with. I mean, they did pay back all the money, to be fair, and they were very apologetic, but they do need to develop their tourist industry. Laos, Myanmar, and Thailand. Well, Thailand is one of the most visited countries in the world, I understand. It's in the top 10. Laos, dirt poor. Myanmar is a war zone, so I can't imagine it's high on the tourist target. But it's a good question. I mean, I actually spoke to a doctor recently. She's in my father's orchestra, and she was going with her boyfriend in Cambodia, and she actually had an incident where there was a car crash. Hello. Oh, okay. I'll be down in 5 minutes. Okay, guys, you could see that was my father just calling up. I am going to have to wrap this one up because I do want to watch that series with them. I think it's been a good live stream. Toxic, I'm sorry I have to cut off your contribution here. I appreciate that you've written a lot, so apologies that I have to cut off. But I totally agree with your sentiments on this. You know my views on gun violence. Also, Nathan, did you know that Japan is horrifically facing a childbirth decline? Yeah, absolutely. But that's true of a lot of wealthy countries. There is aging population. It's part of why I gave the Japanese government a petition to deal with all of this. I hope they get to it. You've given a petition to the Japanese government. I mean, I applaud that. I always, I'm a big believer in petitions. So there's another thing about Japan. I'll quickly say this just to round this off. I generally see Japan in a good way. I generally get a good impression from Japan, but one thing I don't like, and I'm saying this as a conservative on crime. One big flaw with the Japanese system is they have famously low crime rates. That's great. I mean, it's a lot safer than a country like Haiti. It's like another world. But the flip side of that is they do have a dubious justice system, which is hugely reliant on confessions. It's something like 99% of cases, it has a conviction rate. Now, that is dubious because there has been miscarriages of justice. There was a guy, he was a boxer, and back in the 60s, he was convicted of murder and rape, I believe, and he spent almost 50 years on death row in Japan. He only got exonerated recently because there was a new trial. Um, Japanese police could be very efficient, or there is an overt reliance on confessions. I think that's a bit dubious. Also, it's one of the few democracies that still has a death penalty, along with the United States. And unlike the American system, where they know the exact date they're going to die, in Japan, they've no idea. So if you're on death row in Japan, the the hangman could, I think they do it by hanging. The hangman could come in literally the next day or a year later. I think that's just cruel. I think it's unnecessary. Um, I'm conservative. I think criminals should be punished, but I do think there's some question marks about the Japanese system. It's an extremely safe country, and I hope it stays that way. But I do think there are more than a few miscarriages of justice behind that. So they do need to look in on that and in how they are doing that. Okay, guys, I'll say good night. Happy New Year to all of you. I'll do this periodically throughout 25. Hope it's a good year for all of you. Thank you for coming in. And Thomas, if you're still there, thank you for bringing up that case. Very important. Okay, guys, Happy New Year. I'm going to watch that with my parents now. If you do get access to it, Lockerbie with Colin Firth, it's a it's a very moving drama. Okay, thank you, guys. Happy New Year.